The new section of the advance will cost $25 million and take 5 years to build.
Well, it's estimated by government that the benefit would be roughly $116 million over 10 years.
Deep in the waters off northeastern Australia, one of the most important places on Earth sits hidden from the world. A tiny island, barely visible above the sea, that holds the future of an entire species in its sand.
All the trials and tribulations that these animals go through just to get off the island itself and then to come back again, possibly 2,000 kilometres. You have to admire their tenacity and you have to admire their will to survive.
Every year, tens of thousands of endangered green sea turtles cross thousands of kilometres of open ocean to reach it. They have done this for over 1 million years. But something had gone terribly wrong. These ancient creatures were arriving and dying by the thousands, falling off cliffs in the dead of night. The losses were staggering, up to 2,000 breeding females gone in a single season. Then scientists did something very simple to stop it. They built fences. So what happened next when they put it to the test? Join us as we uncover how this idea shocked everyone beyond their wildest imaginations. The crisis, an unseen danger. Far off the northeastern coast of Australia lies a tiny strip of land that barely rises above the surface of the sea. Rain Island sits on the outer edges of the Great Barrier Reef, approximately 620 kilometres north-northwest of Cairns. It covers only 27 hectares, smaller than many city parks. There are no hotels, no roads, and no permanent residents. The island is uninhabited by humans, and entry is strictly controlled. Most people will never set eyes on it. But for one creature, this speck of coral sand is the most important place on the planet. Rain Island is the largest and most important green sea turtle nesting area in the world. Every year, from November through to March, female green turtles make one of nature's most extraordinary journeys. They travel across thousands of kilometers of open ocean, navigating using the Earth's magnetic field, to return to the exact beach where they were born. Around 90% of the Great Barrier Reef's entire northern green turtle population originates from the Rain Island National Park. This is not just an important nesting site. It is the single most critical piece of habitat for an entire population of an endangered species. Green turtles have existed on Earth for over 100 million years. They survived the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs. They have outlasted ice ages and the rise and fall of entire civilizations. Rain Island has been a nesting place for green turtles for over 1,000 years, making it the longest-known marine turtle rookery anywhere in the world. In a peak nesting season, the numbers that arrive at this tiny island are massive. More than 60,000 green turtles lay their eggs at Rain Island in peak nesting seasons, with as many as 20,000 inching their way onto the beach in a single night. But beneath this extraordinary scene, something was going terribly wrong. For decades, the problem went largely unnoticed, hidden by the sheer scale of the turtles' arrival. Scientists who began studying the island in the 1980s started to notice that something was off. The numbers of turtles arriving each season remained large, but the number of hatchlings making it into the sea was declining. Eggs that should have hatched were dying in the sand. The island that had sustained this population for a millennium was slowly becoming a trap. Over 30 years ago, scientists began witnessing an alarming new phenomenon. Salt water was flooding the beach at high tide, drowning eggs and reducing the number of hatchlings emerging from nests. The island's low-lying beaches had gradually lost elevation over time, and the nesting areas that female turtles depended on were now sitting too close to sea level. When tidal surges swept across the sand, they reached the nests buried beneath. Sadly, eggs cannot survive underwater. An entire clutch, sometimes over 100 eggs, could be destroyed in a single tide. This was happening across large sections of the beach, season after season, and the losses were mounting. But the flooding was only part of the story. Changes in the island's landscape were causing as many as 2,000 adult turtles in a season to die from overturning and entrapment in rocky cliffs, and from heat exhaustion on the beach. Female turtles crawl ashore at night, nest in complete darkness, and then attempt to find their way back to the ocean. On a beach that has changed shape, with rocky outcrops and elevated ledges in the wrong places, disoriented turtles were becoming stranded. By the time the sun rose and the temperature began to climb, those turtles were already in serious danger. Adult female turtles returned to the sea exhausted, unable to find a safe nesting place, and thousands perished, falling victim to cliff falls, being trapped in rocks, or expiring from heat exhaustion on the sand. These were not young or sick animals. These were mature breeding females, the most valuable individuals in the population. A female green turtle does not reach breeding age until she is between 25 and 50 years old. Losing thousands of them each season was a blow that the population could not sustain indefinitely. The main threat to biodiversity on Rain Island is climate change, causing increased temperatures, rising sea levels, and more extreme storms, all reducing reproductive success of green turtles that use Rain Island as a nesting site. The island was losing the battle against forces far larger than itself, and the consequences were not limited to the turtles alone. Rain Island is also home to the most important seabird nursery in the Great Barrier Reef World Heritage Area, and many other reef animals rely on this tiny remote island. A decline in any one species can have a devastating effect on this delicate ecosystem. For years, the full scale of the crisis went unappreciated, partly because the island is so remote, and partly because the sight of tens of thousands of turtles arriving each season made it look, at first glance, like everything was fine. It was only through careful, patient scientific monitoring, counting hatchlings, tracking nesting success, and recording adult fatalities that researchers began to understand the true picture. The world's most important green turtle rookery was in big trouble, and without intervention, the decline would only worsen. Fortunately, a plan was hatched. The discovery, the cliff problem. As researchers at Rain Island began to piece together the full picture of what was killing the turtles, they identified several threats working at once. Flooding nests were one. Heat exhaustion was another. But among all the dangers facing the nesting females on this small island, one cause of death was really disturbing, and especially preventable. Female turtles were walking off cliffs, not in small numbers, not occasionally. It was happening on a massive scale, season after season, and it had been happening for years before anyone fully grasped the extent of it. To understand why, it helps to know what Rain Island actually looks like up close. The island is not a flat stretch of sand from edge to edge. The island's seabird nesting area is largely protected from wandering sea turtles by a low phosphate rock cliff, formed by phosphates leaching from bird guano, cementing sediments together. This raised central section sits above the surrounding beach. It is not tall. The cliffs reach only about 1 to 2 meters in height, but for a 150-kilogram sea turtle that cannot fly and cannot right itself once overturned, even a short drop is fatal. Female turtles come ashore at night. They are driven by instinct, not sight. They follow a biological memory laid down decades earlier and head toward the interior of the island to dig their nests. Nesting turtles are able to find their way up onto these cliffs through a number of sand ramps around the island and then tumble off the edges, landing upside down, from which there is no escape. Once a turtle lands on its back, it is helpless. Its own weight presses down on its lungs. It cannot use its flippers to roll itself over on solid rock. In the darkness, no one is there to help. And when the sun rises and the temperature climbs past 40 degrees, a turtle stuck on its back in direct tropical sunlight will die from heat stroke within hours. It has been estimated that perhaps up to 1,500 adult female turtles die in this way in one season, along with others that become disoriented on low-lying back beach areas during the heat of the day. Those numbers were deeply alarming to scientists. Rain Island was not just a nesting site that happened to be declining. It had become, in certain seasons, an active killing ground, one where the animals' own instincts were leading them to their ends. The tragedy was that these cliffs had always been there. What changed was the condition of the beach. As sand levels dropped and the landscape shifted, more turtles were wandering into the interior and finding the cliff edges in the dark. Researchers observing the island during nesting season saw the pattern repeat itself continuously. Turtles would emerge from the sea, move up the beach, locate one of the sand ramps that led to the higher central plateau, climb up, and then, in the darkness and confusion, stumble off the far edge. Earlier studies had shown that cliff falls and entrapments caused roughly 1/3 of all nesting turtle mortality at Rain Island. Of all the ways a nesting female could die on this island, falling off a cliff was among the leading causes. The question of what to do about it led to one of the simplest ideas in the entire history of the project. If the turtles were reaching the cliff edge and falling off, could a barrier be placed along the top of the cliffs to physically block them? It would not need to stop the turtles entirely. Fencing would need to block off the cliff edges, but keep open natural ramps for entrance and exit of turtles to the center of the island. The goal was not to keep turtles away from the island's interior altogether. They needed access to some of it for nesting, but to prevent them from reaching the unprotected cliff edges. In November 2011, 100 meters of modified aluminium pool fencing, 50 centimeters high with vertical bars at 30-centimeter intervals, was installed in 3 areas around the tops of small cliffs on the eastern end of the island. It was a modest, low-cost trial. The material was ordinary aluminium pool fencing, the kind used around backyards across Australia. There was nothing high-tech about it, but the principle was sound, and the team needed to find out quickly whether it would work. Surveys of turtle carcasses took place in November 2011 before installation, and again in December and February the next year after installation. The before and after comparison was striking. Fewer turtle carcasses were found at the base of the cliff after the fence was installed, just 2 carcasses compared to 60 before installation. In the areas where the fencing had been placed, the death toll had fallen by 97%. The fencing had worked far better than even the most optimistic expectations. A simple, inexpensive physical barrier had saved dozens of turtles in a single season. The result was not just encouraging, it changed the entire direction of the conservation response. Researchers now had clear evidence that cliff-top fencing could make a difference to turtle survival. The installation of cliff-top fencing has since prevented hundreds of turtles from falling down cliffs onto their backs and becoming trapped. The challenge was scaling that intervention up. However, a full solution would require far more than a single small research team could manage alone. The collaboration project. The results of the fencing trial made it clear that targeted action on Rain Island could save lives. But it also made clear that the scale of the problem demanded a response far beyond what any single agency could manage. The Rain Island Recovery Project aimed to restore and protect the island and help prevent deaths of turtles. It was built from the start as a partnership, one that brought together government agencies, conservation organizations, indigenous traditional owners, and private industry in a combination that had never quite been tried before on this scale. Rain Island falls within the traditional lands and waters of the Wuthathi Aboriginal people, who share their interests in the area with Torres Strait Islander peoples, the Arabamlay, the Ugaramlay, and the Meriamlay. These communities have maintained a relationship with the island and its turtles for thousands of years. Their knowledge of the land, the sea, and the seasonal patterns of animal behavior was not secondary to the scientific work of the project. It was central to it. The project applied 60,000 years of traditional knowledge that shaped every major decision made on the island. The Rain Island Recovery Project was launched as a 5-year, $8 million Australian dollars initiative involving the Great Barrier Reef Foundation, the Queensland Government, and traditional owners. Mining company BHP came on board as the primary corporate sponsor, contributing significant funding. The Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority provided regulatory oversight and scientific expertise. Queensland Parks and Wildlife Service deployed rangers to carry out on-the-ground work during each visit to the island. Together, this group formed a project reference group that met regularly to guide the work and make shared decisions about the island's management. One of the first priorities was expanding the fencing program that the 2011 trial had proven so effective. Rangers and traditional owners worked tirelessly to prevent nesting turtle mortalities from cliff falls by installing 1,750 meters of custom-made turtle-proof fencing. This was not ordinary hardware. The fencing was designed specifically for the conditions at Rain Island, strong enough to redirect a large, determined sea turtle, low enough that seabirds nesting on the central plateau would not be disturbed, and engineered to leave natural sand ramps accessible so that turtles could still move between the beach and the interior. Wuthathi and Mariam Nation Rangers took part in the installation directly, working alongside scientists in some of the most remote and logistically demanding conditions imaginable. But fencing was only one part of the response. The deeper problem, the flooding of nests caused by the lowering of the beach, required a much more dramatic solution. The team worked to reprofile the beach, shifting 40,000 cubic meters of sand to raise the nesting beaches above the risk zone, doubling the viable nesting habitat on the island. Heavy earth-moving machinery was brought to the island across multiple expeditions. Moving that machinery to a location 620 kilometers offshore, with no port, no infrastructure, and no permanent access road, was an extraordinary logistical undertaking. Cultural heritage advisors from the Wuthathi and Mariam Nation supervised the large-scale sand reprofiling works throughout the process, ensuring that the modifications to the island did not disturb sites of cultural significance or undermine the ecological relationships that traditional owners had understood for generations. The reshaping of the beach was not simply a matter of moving sand from one place to another. It required careful geomorphological analysis, understanding how the island's surface had changed over time. Beyond the physical works, the project introduced a detailed monitoring program using technology that was previously impossible to apply in such a remote location. A sophisticated monitoring and research system using 3D modeling, satellite technology, and drones was employed, and monitoring continues. Satellite tags were fitted to selected female turtles to track their movements across the ocean after nesting season, providing data on their foraging grounds and migration routes. This information helped researchers understand not only what was happening on the island, but what was happening to the turtles across the full range of their oceanic life. The project also established a rescue program. Every morning during nesting season, a dedicated crew walked the full perimeter of the island, a task they called the Rescue Walk. During each field trip, the research crew walked the island every morning, helping turtles trapped in the rocks or under the cliff edges, carrying exhausted or disorientated turtles back to the water's edge on a turtle sled or a power carrier. The rescue program turned what would have been certain mortalities into recoveries, and the numbers saved mounted steadily over successive seasons. What had begun as a small fencing trial in 2011 had grown into one of the most comprehensive marine conservation programs ever attempted in Australian waters. The Rain Island Recovery Project was defined not only by what it did, but by how it did it, through genuine collaboration, with traditional knowledge treated as equally valid as scientific data, and with each partner contributing what they did best to a shared goal that none of them could have achieved alone. But even more shocking was the overall results. The shocking results. When the full results of the Rain Island Recovery Project began to come into focus, the scale of what had been achieved was difficult to process. Conservation projects rarely produce dramatic turnarounds. Ecosystems take time, species recover slowly. But at Rain Island, the combination of clifftop fencing, beach reprofiling, daily turtle rescues, and improved monitoring produced outcomes that surprised even the scientists who had designed the interventions. The numbers told a story that no one had quite dared to expect. The most immediate success came from the fencing. One of the first management actions of the Rain Island Recovery Project was to complete the installation of 1.75 kilometers of cliff-top fencing around parts of the island's raised central phosphate cliff to block access and reduce cliff fall turtle mortalities and entrapments under the cliff line. Because of this intervention, turtle mortalities from cliff falls over the life of the project were reduced from 30% to 5%. Before the fencing, roughly 1 in 3 nesting turtle mortalities on the island was caused by cliff falls. After the full fencing program was completed, that figure dropped to 1 in 20. The fencing alone changed the survival odds for thousands of female turtles each season. It is estimated that fencing alone has saved over 500 breeding turtles, which is a great result for the world's largest nesting site of green sea turtles. To understand why that number matters so much, it is important to remember what a breeding female green turtle represents. She has already survived over 2 decades of ocean life to reach maturity, escaping predators, fishing nets, boat strikes, and plastic pollution. She carries within her the genetic diversity of her population, and she is capable of returning to nest every 3 to 7 years for the rest of her life, which can span several more decades. Saving 500 breeding females is not the same as saving hundreds of individual animals. It is saving the future reproductive potential of an entire population. The rescue program added to those numbers directly. A dedicated turtle rescue crew ensured turtles ashore at sunrise were returned to the ocean before they died from heat exhaustion on the island, saving the lives of 696 nesting females. Combined with the fencing results, this meant that well over 1,000 breeding females had been saved through active intervention across the life of the project. Females who would go on to nest again in future seasons, contributing eggs and hatchlings to a population that had been in decline for 3 decades. But the transformation of the nesting beaches produced the most dramatic numbers of all. The reprofiling works raised the beach above the tidal inundation zone and doubled the viable nesting habitat on the island. The results were measurable within seasons. In the reprofiled areas, turtles spread out when nesting, minimizing the chance of digging up already laid clutches of eggs. Nests were being laid above inundation level at all times, and fewer eggs were dying in the early stages of development. This simple act transformed the beach from a zone where nests routinely failed into one where eggs could develop normally. Because of the project, an additional 640 endangered green turtles have already begun life on the Great Barrier Reef, with an additional 4.6 million hatchlings expected to start life on the reef over the next 10 years. Those figures represented something that conservation science rarely gets to witness. Hatchlings that should not have existed, that would have drowned in their shells or cooked before they could emerge, were now reaching the ocean. They were swimming out into the reef. Some of them would survive the gauntlet of predators and open ocean and return, decades from now, to nest on the same beach where they were born. And then came a discovery that reframed the entire story. During the 2019 nesting season, researchers used drones to carry out population surveys from the air. Drone vision captured in December showed up to 64,000 green turtles around the island waiting to come ashore and lay clutches of eggs. The footage was extraordinary. The sea around the island turned dark with the massive animals. But the number itself was not the only revelation. When researchers compared drone counts to previous observer counts, they found that past estimates had been underestimated by a factor of 1.7. Previous methods had been systematically low. The true population using Rain Island was larger than anyone had known. The drones were more accurate and less disruptive to the turtles than traditional counting methods, which had involved using boats and non-toxic paint to mark the animals. Not only did the new data confirm record numbers at the island, it prompted scientists to go back and revise historical population estimates upward, providing a clearer baseline for understanding how the population had changed over time. The record gathering of 64,000 turtles became the largest ever documented congregation of green sea turtles on the planet. And it happened at the same island that just years earlier had been losing thousands of adults every season to preventable mortalities. Now, the question is, How does this change everything? A proven model for the world. The story of Rain Island did not end when the first impressive results were announced. Conservation work at that scale and in that environment is never finished. Researchers returned to the island every nesting season. Rangers continued their morning rescue walks. The fencing required inspection and maintenance. The reprofiled beaches needed ongoing monitoring to confirm that the sand remained stable and that the nesting habitat had not eroded back toward its previous state. What Rain Island offered the world was not simply a set of results. It was a living proof of concept. Scientific research published in peer-reviewed journals confirmed that the reprofiled areas were stable and had increased hatchling output from the island. The sand had not simply washed away in the years following each reshaping operation. The new landform held. The nesting habitat above tidal inundation was not a temporary fix. It had become part of the island's geography and functioned exactly as the geomorphological analysis had predicted. During follow-up visits, researchers confirmed that reprofiled areas remained stable and that more females were successfully nesting there than on other parts of the island. The monitoring program continued to produce valuable data, highlighting how long-term the recovery of a sea turtle population truly is. Researchers observed 143 previously tagged green turtles, including one that had been tagged 30 years earlier at its feeding ground. That turtle was a powerful symbol of the species' endurance. Its descendants were still part of the Great Barrier Reef population, demonstrating the importance of protecting long-lived animals whose reproductive contributions extend across decades. The satellite tracking program provided further insight into the broader significance of Rain Island's recovery. Tagged females were followed across thousands of kilometers after each nesting season, revealing foraging areas stretching from Queensland to the Torres Strait and beyond. 3 satellite-tracked turtles, Tokaloo, Myrtle, and Turturi, all successfully returned to their feeding grounds after spending around 3 months at Rain Island and laying several clutches. Every turtle that survived the nesting season contributed to future generations. By improving adult survival and nesting success, the project strengthened the wider green turtle population throughout the Great Barrier Reef ecosystem. The fencing also proved to have an unexpected benefit. It helped protect seabirds and their nests and chicks from disturbance. When large numbers of turtles move across the island's central plateau in the dark, they can crush seabird nests and disrupt breeding activity. The same fencing that redirected turtles away from cliff edges also reduced their presence in the most sensitive seabird zones, delivering a conservation benefit that had not been the original purpose of the intervention. Rain Island is a critical seabird rookery within the Great Barrier Reef World Heritage Area and one of only 2 nesting sites for the endangered red-tailed tropic bird. The project therefore strengthened the island's ecological value for multiple species, not only sea turtles. The project also demonstrated what became perhaps its most important lesson, that conventional conservation and indigenous stewardship are not in tension. They are stronger together. The Wuthathi people and Meriam Nation people were involved in caring for Rain Island and its animals, participating in research trips, sharing traditional knowledge, and taking part in on-ground work and monitoring activities. The cultural and ecological knowledge held by these communities did not merely complement the scientific work. In several cases, it helped guide it. The 5-year Rain Island Recovery Project became recognized as a world-leading model for the restoration of critical marine nesting habitat. Other conservation programs working with sea turtles around the world began studying its methods, the way it combined physical habitat restoration with direct animal rescue, long-term population monitoring, and community partnership. The approach was relatively cost-effective. What it required most was patience, coordination, and a commitment to solving a problem over many years, rather than expecting a single fix. Even with the project's successes, the future remains challenging. Climate change continues to drive increasing temperatures, rising sea levels, and more extreme storms, all of which threaten the reproductive success of the green turtles that use Rain Island. One consequence of warming temperatures has already become a major scientific concern. The temperature of green turtle nests at Rain Island has been too high for male hatchlings to develop since the 1990s, meaning nearly all hatchlings produced since then have been female. A population that produces almost no males faces a different kind of long-term threat, one that no fence or beach reshaping can solve on its own. What the project proved, above all else, was that the outcome was not inevitable. The turtles did not have to keep dying on those cliffs. The eggs did not have to keep drowning in the sand. Human beings had created many of the conditions that put Rain Island's turtles at risk through pollution, climate change, overharvesting, and habitat destruction across the ocean. Human beings also had the ability to intervene carefully, collaboratively, and with respect for both science and indigenous knowledge, and pull a population back from the edge. That is what Rain Island proved. It demonstrated that conservation can succeed through science, commitment, and partnership. The lessons learned on this remote island extend far beyond the Great Barrier Reef, offering a practical model for restoring vulnerable species and habitats around the world. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories about wildlife and conservation.